We talk a lot about what AI can do, and there's a good reason behind that. The capabilities are extraordinary, and they're getting better almost by the day. But there is another side of this conversation that I really think deserves a lot more attention, and that's what AI still can't replace. Because an experienced mind carries something different. It carries years of context, of mistakes, memories, judgment, and all those little moments that taught us how the world actually works. So, this is really about getting beyond the pattern and looking at why lived experience may become even more valuable as AI becomes more capable. There's no doubt that AI is becoming incredibly good at the mechanical parts of knowledge work. It can generate options quickly, and it can spot correlations buried inside enormous amounts of information. It can also remove a lot of friction that used to come with research and organizing what we know. And that's all a pretty big deal. But here's where I think we need to make an important distinction now. Recognizing a pattern in data isn't necessarily the same thing as understanding what that pattern means. AI may see the connection. An experienced person, however, is going to understand why the connection matters, or why, in this particular situation, it doesn't matter at all. And that difference becomes very important. An experienced mind doesn't just contain more information, it carries memories with context attached to them. Maybe you remember the meeting where everybody nodded their heads and agreed, but you could tell that nobody was really convinced, right? Or the customer who told you one thing, and after years of dealing with people, you knew they actually meant something else. And sometimes it's an idea that looked ridiculous when somebody first suggested it, but years later, you realize the idea wasn't wrong at all. The timing was wrong. Those experiences become part of how we think. They're not sitting neatly in a database. They become a kind of internal map, if you will. And we draw from that map every time we encounter something that feels even remotely familiar. And this is where nuance enters the picture. Two situations can look almost identical from the surface. The same numbers, similar circumstances, similar choices, but underneath, the situation may be completely different. Maybe the interpersonal stakes have changed, or there's history that nobody put into the data. Maybe there was a failure 3 years ago that still shapes how everyone in the room thinks about this decision. And then there are all those unspoken intentions or questions about whether people are actually ready for the idea. An experienced mind has learned to look below that surface. It's not simply asking, what are the differences? It's asking, which differences actually matter here? So in a sense, AI and the experienced mind are operating with two very different engines. The machine can draw on enormous amounts of information. It can compare, organize, and find connections at a scale none of us could possibly match. And the experienced mind is doing something else. We remember what events meant. We remember how people reacted or what happened after a decision was made. And over time, those memories turn into practical judgment. So the machine may have an extraordinary ability to find connections. The human advantage is often knowing which connection deserves our attention. That distinction is subtle, but I think it's going to become increasingly important as we move forward. Because judgment doesn't always arrive with the spreadsheet proving that we're right. Sometimes it's much quieter than that. You look at a project or a plan or maybe an AI generated recommendation, and something just doesn't feel right. And you may not even be able to explain it immediately. But then you remember another project that looked almost perfect. Every number said go. Everybody thought it was going to work. And it failed because of one assumption nobody thought to question. That little feeling you have today isn't magic. It may be decades of pattern recognition showing up before your conscious mind has fully explained what it's seeing. And that's worth paying attention to. This is also where we have to be a little careful with AI, because when a tool is fast, accurate, and incredibly polished, it's very easy to start handing over more of the thinking. But speed isn't the same as judgment. And a polished answer isn't necessarily perspective, just as an accurate prediction isn't automatically understanding. AI can give us something that looks finished very quickly, and it can create the illusion that the thinking is finished too. I don't think it is. There still has to be a human somewhere in that process asking, does this actually make sense here? Asking, what are we missing? Or asking, what assumptions are hiding inside this answer? And most importantly, what do I know from experience that the system doesn't know? And this is really where I think the opportunity is. It isn't machine versus human. Get that out of your head if that's what you think, because that's not it. It's combination. Let AI expand the field. Let it find connections we might have missed, or organize huge amounts of information, or challenge our assumptions, or bring forward alternatives we hadn't considered. That's what it's extraordinarily good at. And then we bring ourselves back into the process. We bring memory, lived experience. We bring judgment and context, nuance, and the ability to understand the stakes around a decision. So AI expands what we can see, and the experienced mind helps us decide what to do with what we're seeing. That's a much more interesting relationship than simply asking the machine for an answer. And that brings us back to the central idea. Don't try to compete with AI on facts, because that's probably a losing game anyway. Instead, recognize what an experienced mind brings to those facts: meaning and context, judgment and perspective, and the ability to understand not only what happened, but why it mattered. An experienced person can look at information and connect it to what came before, how people responded, what changed afterward, and what was learned by actually living through the situation. That's where experience becomes so valuable. It isn't something new technology leaves behind. In many ways, experience is what helps us decide which facts matter, how they fit together, and what to do next. And that's the real opportunity here. It's not artificial intelligence replacing the experienced mind, but artificial intelligence becoming dramatically more useful when an experienced mind is there to interpret it, question it, and guide where it goes next. Thanks for being here.